That was a bad one, a really, really bad one. Reminded me of the Europa League final. I've got to say, United were toothless on the night against Everton, and it is incredibly, incredibly embarrassing to see that a team that barely ever wins at Old Trafford, with a manager that barely ever wins at Old Trafford, even while he was in charge of Manchester United, have rocked up there, had a man sent off, lost their captain, and still managed to come away with a 1-0 win. It is damning. Everton now above Manchester United in the league table. United level on points with Liverpool and Everton. I think in the table they sit in 10th after that. And while it's important to point out that this is redeemable, there are I speak a lot of time on this podcast talking about how there's a bunch of teams in the middle of the league that will beat each other. And that gives lots of teams the opportunity to jump up the table quite quick. And United could have jumped 6 places in the league if they'd have won that game. But fact of the matter is, they never really look like winning it. And United have shown that those weaknesses from last season are still there. And it does not give you a whole lot of hope moving forward. We've done with all those international breaks now, 3 of them out the way. The Premier League weekend went by. Results went in United's favour. United had the opportunity to really build on something and start progressing forward in what is a favourable, I say favourable in quotation marks with my hands, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple. That was a real opportunity to start this new batch of fixtures now on a positive foot, to build up some confidence and to really make a claim to get in the top 5. And what we saw on the night was more of the same. I'm not surprised that we saw it happen because I've seen that performance many, many times before. But after the promise of 3 recent wins, which is now 3 games without a win, it doesn't give you a lot of hope moving forward. And I usually on this pod do try and be your hope dealer, your guy with positivity. I can't really pull any positives out of that one. The only thing I suppose is that has happened, and it's a refresher that that is absolutely unacceptable. Ruben Amorim can run with that. But will that make a difference in the games to come? I'm not entirely sure that it will. And now we're faced again with that old version of United rearing their ugly heads. United were obviously without Matheus Cunha and Benjamin Sesko and a lot of attacking options on the night. And against a low block, you could do with Matheus Cunha. You really could, but they didn't risk him on the night. I think he's sustained a head injury in training. And it was poor. It really was. No composure, poor quality on the ball. Ruben Amorim's decision about playing 3 defenders or 5 is obviously top of the agenda again, as it's going to be. And he won't move from this system. That's the big criticism of him. You know, if you listen to this podcast or have listened to it for any amount of time, that my take on this is a lot more along the lines of the mentality is wrong. But on this night, when you're playing against 10 men, I think Ruben had to change something, and he didn't change enough for me. But the moment that Diogo Dalot came on the pitch as left wing back, I posted a meme or a GIF on social media of me pouring a heavy drink into not me, an old lady, I think it was, pouring a heavy drink into a massive glass that was already filled with alcohol. And you just want to bang your head against the wall sometimes. You really do. It's a bad one. Really, really bad one. And I'm sure that if you listen to this or you're watching this, you're pretty frustrated and pretty ticked off. And so am I as well, even though the apathy, it has taken over again for me after watching that. So I suppose from the perspective of how I feel today, I'm not super angry. Yes, of course I'm frustrated, but I've seen that performance lots of times before, that it's just not worth for me getting really, really ticked off about it. And I suppose, hopefully, I can maybe come to you with more of a level head on the Promised Land podcast today than other channels you may get out there. But I will say this: never too high, never too low. Of course, bigger picture. Of course, on the basis of that performance, though, I can't give you highs. I can't give you real areas of encouragement because it was poor all over the pitch. Pretty much all over the pitch. Subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple, and on YouTube as well. The links are in the description. Follow me on social at _Scott Saunders as well on X, Instagram, and TikTok, where there's plenty. Look, social media is always a bad place after United lose. United have to win every game otherwise, and if you lose a game in that fashion, the conversation pivots straight back to, well, get the manager out. He's not good enough. He's not good enough. And look, that he's not going to be able to escape that unless things turn around. He just isn't going to. But it's a horrible place to really spend your time scrolling through, because the negativity takes over straight away, and with good reason. With good reason. I can't, like I say, I can't give you any real positives after that one. So if you just want to sit here or wherever you listen to this, just wallow in the self-pity that was that performance last night, I'll do my best to take you through what my thoughts on the game were. So let's get into that. Look, Everton had 10 men for 70 minutes plus injury time. And I said on social that they didn't break a sweat in defending. Maybe that was a little bit over the top. United did put more pressure on towards the end of the game. The chances they created were never clear cut. They were, I think the XG was about 1.7 or something, but no actual chance got above a 0.2, a 0.2. So they didn't create clear cut chances. Everton's plan was always going to be, whether they had 11 or 10, was if they got the lead, they would do that. They would sit in and they would try and break away, and they would try and catch United, who are on an off night. There's lots of those off nights, but United from the very first whistle were looking clueless early on. Everton with 11 were great. Everton with 11 were on top. Everton with 11 were threatening. And United didn't seem to have, even in the first 10 minutes, first 13 minutes, first 15 minutes, first 20 minutes, Everton were very much on top in the game. And the manager often talks about how he feels like he gets an impression of how his team is going to play from the first few minutes of the game. And that notion was true on this night as well. There wasn't really a massive upturn and an upswing in intensity, in momentum, in speed of the game. It just didn't come the entire night. And Amorim, who is going to get pelters all week. This is going to be another one. You got Crystal Palace away next weekend as well. So this game against Everton was really important to go and win, just to show that the trend is moving in a positive direction. Now you're running the risk here of, if you go to Palace, who are a good team, and you go to Palace on Sunday and you lose that, we're right back to where we were at the start of the season. The same conversations about getting rid of the manager will become even more pertinent if they don't go and pull out a really impressive performance against Palace. Like, even that is probably not going to change people's minds. I know a lot of people have made up their minds about this manager, and like, fair play to you if that's the way that you feel. But I think the criticism that I have is twofold here, and I do usually come down on the side of the mentality and the side of getting your head in the game and making sure that you're at your tip-top premium in terms of output, in terms of your attitude, in terms of winning your duels. That's the most important thing for me, turning up to every game like you mean it and like you want to win it. Everton, from the very beginning of the game, whether that was with 11 or 10, had the better of United on that day. That was just how it was. But obviously, Ruben Amorim can't escape criticism from this. He's not going to escape it from me either. Like, the decisions, to the Dalot substitution, the Gary Neville on commentary was just all night long talking about the system and how the 3 centre-backs, or the 5, depends on how you want to define it, were not being adventurous enough. The team as a whole weren't being adventurous enough. Brian Mbeumo spent too much time out of the box trying to help United in their build-up. You just faced against a wall of 9 men plus the goalkeeper that were just happy to sit there and defend every single cross that came in. United were bereft of ideas throughout the entire night. They did have some chances. Bruno Fernandes flashed one over the bar. Joshua Zirkzee with a header was saved really well by Jordan Pickford. But United just didn't do enough on the night. And Amorim could have been and should have been more adventurous with what he was doing. He doesn't really help himself with some of the substitutions that he made, some of the decisions that he made, and that's a completely valid point. It usually is a valid point, but especially when you're playing against 10 and 1 forward and a group of players that were just happy to sit in and defend all night, you can probably afford to take a few more risks with how you approach the game and the personnel that you have on the pitch. I think that was the big thing for me on the night that I wanted to see the manager change. Look, I think the players are culpable and the manager is culpable. That's my take on this. So I will spend my time across the episode talking about both of those things. I'll start with the players. The application on the night from the players for me wasn't there. Summed up in the goal itself. Lenny Yoro and Bruno Fernandes were far, far too weak against Keenan Dewsbury Hall, who curled it in the top corner, like really well. Fair play to him. But United have to stop that. They have to be stronger. They cannot lose. Yoro, I think it was, cannot lose that duel on the edge of the penalty area and allow him to get the shot away. It's nights like this, and this is why the Premier League's so tricky, and Liverpool are finding out as well. This on the same points as United now, and have lost a hell of a lot of games over the last few weeks. If your application isn't there, if you don't want to win every duel, if you don't want to win first balls or second balls, and your application to winning that duel isn't there, and the opposition wants it more than you, they will punish you. They will hurt you. Even teams like Everton. Dewsbury Hall pulled out an absolute worldie of a curler into the top corner. But United didn't do enough to stop him. And this is after, by the way, Idrissa Gana Gueye and I think it was Michael Keane, right, were in an argument, and Gueye hits him across the face and gets sent off for it. You could argue that on the night that summed up how much Everton wanted to win, even if they're fighting against each other because they're not doing certain things. Look, for me, for the record, I don't think, to the letter of the law, I think it's a red card, and you can see why the ref gave it. For me, it isn't. And I think Everton should have remained with 11. I think they were quite harshly treated in that sense. But it's also stupid to raise your arm against anyone and to slap someone across the neck or the face. Look, you run the risk. It's stupidity, really. And this, but it did sum up how much Everton were willing, or how much they wanted it, I suppose, because that anger was misdirected at the time, but shows they wanted to win. United didn't have that same intensity, and they shouldn't never act like that. No footballer should, but Everton, to me, just wanted it from the first minute, whether they were with 11 or with 10, they wanted it more. They were getting to loose balls first. They were dribbling around tackles, which were too weak most of the night. Tierno Barry, I think this was the most out of any other player in a Premier League game this season. He won 14 aerial duels. I talk about duels. I talk about getting the better of your man individually. That statistic sums it up for me. And Amorim is ultimately the man and the manager who is responsible for getting that intensity out of the players in every game that he turns up to. But he is the guy who is every press conference, every time he speaks to the media, stating that intensity, that attitude not being there is Manchester United's biggest issue, no matter the tactics. And that's what I fall down on a lot. That's the argument I try and get across a lot, because I did a poll before I started recording this and on social media, and I asked how many people listen and watch what Ruben Amorim has to say, or any manager has to say about the game after the game. 85% said no. So it tells me really that the actual underlying problem, people don't get to hear his side of things. I understand it. If you do you, that, it's completely fine. It's completely cool. But it also tells me that there's not a fundamental understanding among the fan base of what United think the problems actually are. And that's why there's no patience. Amorim's talking all the time about intensity and attitude and all of this. And we didn't see it on this night. United were much better at Liverpool because they wanted, they were going into duels and winning them, or winning second balls. Against Everton here, Everton did to United what United did to Liverpool, in a sense, I suppose. Simply put, for me, you have to turn up into every game wanting to win it and showing that through the duels, through the numbers, through the amount you run, all of this, that should reflect your positive approach to the game. You need to come out on top in terms of those duels, in terms of those numbers. For me, like I'll say this now, and I will criticize Ruben Amorim and his approach soon. So if you're waiting for me to do that, I will. But fundamentally, the problem with Manchester United, the reason why they have lost games like this for 12 years, home games against teams that you'd expect them to beat, is usually because the players on the pitch at the time do not apply themselves in the right way, no matter who the manager is. And that is why you go through the manager cycle. To me, this is what I think. And what Ruben Amorim says every single time he faces the media, which people ultimately don't see. This is the reason why people just don't want to hear from him. All they want to do is see improvements on the pitch, but he thinks the problem is the application. So there's a bit of a disconnect. For me, I watch everything that he says, and I watched what he said this morning after the game. I didn't have time for it. I couldn't be bothered with it after the game immediately. So I watched it this morning before I recorded the pod. And again, he said, we weren't good enough. Everton were better than us with 11 or 10. He was going along the lines of they wanted it more than us. And ultimately in the Premier League, that is above all the most important thing. We saw sluggish passing sideways, passing out of running lines, where players were looking to get on the front foot and the pass was behind them. Absolutely terrible from the first minute. Joshua Zirkzee came in and was incredibly guilty of the above. I don't want to point fingers specifically at him because the whole team were useless. But him specifically, the ball in the first half especially was just not sticking to his feet, which is maybe he has a bit of rust because he hasn't been playing matches. But ultimately, if you are to go and win people around and take your chance, you need to be stronger and more careful with the ball, especially in those forward positions, than he was on the night. He did improve throughout the game, I think, but to what level? I think all United's players on the night were terrible. Patrick Dorgu, I have concerns. I do. And the quality just isn't there, really. I said when I saw the lineup selected and it was announced, and we saw Mazraoui and Dorgu on either side, that I could understand why I wouldn't want to see Ahmad against Jack Grealish 11 versus 11, Ahmad defending against him, for example. So understand it on that side of things. But also United just do not have enough in attack when you have two fullbacks at wing back. And we know that's a problem. And that's probably the manager's doing. I do think United need more personnel, better personnel, more attacking personnel in those positions. But he had opportunities on the night, which I will get into in a second, to do more in the senses of those players in those positions. But Patrick Dorgu is, he's young. I don't want to point fingers too much. But I'm just not convinced at the moment that he's ready, really, to make a big difference. And what Ruben Amorim's teams really excel on is having... Look, there's lots of talk about back five, right? And people were damning the back five all night. And on Sky, on the coverage, you would get, well, look, there's a flat back five line there. Gary Neville, I think he instructed the camera at one point to zoom out a little bit so you could see it. This was from an Everton free kick in their own half when the ball was coming along. This isn't in attack, When United attack, the wing backs are high on the last line. The issue there is with the three centre backs, and if you need them, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I think the back five is a stick to beat Amorim with a lot, but in reality, when they're on the ball, that's not usually the case. It's usually a front five. It just wasn't good enough. And the identity of those players at wing back is a big problem. If you don't have attacking-minded players with attacking qualities and dribbling qualities to beat players out there, generally, against a team sitting in a low block, or generally against any team, you're not going to have much. People will criticize it, and I'm not saying that it's perfect. I've stated many times that I would prefer it to 4. I would prefer it. But this is the way that he wants to do it. He's got to make it work this way, and he will keep trying to make it work this way. And if it doesn't work, that will be the hill that he dies on, I suppose. But just the quality of the performance from the players in general, it was terrible. It was really poor. I don't think there was one player on the night that really showed he was willing to take the game by the scruff of the neck. And Everton just had a relatively easy night in defending everything that came from United, because United didn't have much more of a clue than just crossing the ball in. They moved the ball quickly, too quickly, didn't make the numerical advantage count. And again, Ruben Amorim criticized the players for not doing that in his post-match. So all the frustrations that I have and you have about the players not doing that, he has too. But according to that poll, and look, there was only a few hundred votes on it, but according to that poll, people don't have the time really to listen to what he said. So you immediately get a disconnect. That was the reason why I wanted to do that poll and to understand where people sat on it. Look, I'm not saying you have to go and watch it at all, but it does help to get a picture of, for me, what the biggest problem is at United. And Amorim is spending all of his time calling that out. And ultimately, I think you could change the manager around, but if the intensity isn't there at all times, in every single game you go into, United, whether they play 4 at the back or 5 or 3, they're going to run into those games in future as well, because that is a fundamental thing in the mind of the football club that needs to change. Anyway, let's talk about Ruben Amorim and what he did wrong. Again, United lost 1-0 at home to Everton when they had 10 men. Losses can happen, of course. But the fact that United didn't spend... They put Everton under pressure in the second half, but they just weren't good enough at all on the night. The responsibility is going to fall on the manager, and it always should, and it will. And Amorim needs results to turn this around. And now we're staring down the barrel of Everton just made a blueprint for Wolves, West Ham, teams that United are going to play in the next few weeks. Hey, just sit in. United can't really, the personnel anyway, this personnel, they can't break us down if we do this. So that's an example there for Wolves, who are terrible. Bottom of the league, I think. And West Ham to go and repeat what happened on this night. So I'm quite worried about this run of games that's coming up now, because simply United haven't shown or suggested that they are able to break a team like that down. It's a blueprint for teams to beat United. There will be other teams that United play against that will come out more and give United more space to attack. So that might suit them. That's an age-old problem that we've seen. But on Amorim, right? He just did not do enough on the night for me. Now, I will say this to start with. The subs he didn't use were Shea Lacey, Manuel Ugarte, Lisandro Martinez, who's just come back from a long-term injury, Terrell Malacia, and Aiden Heaven, plus the goalkeeper. So there weren't really any attacking options on there that he didn't use outside of Shea Lacey, who is untried, and there's a completely different argument of another manager might have done this and just thrown him in and seen what he could do. And that I would say that I would still like to have seen that on the night. But I can understand that you might want to protect the young players, especially in what is a damaging defeat, from that criticism, So I understand that. United didn't have 2 of their main attacking options. I think that makes a difference. So what you got really was the majority of the same team as last season, pulling up the same problems as last season. Brian Mbeumo was the only real difference in there from an attacking sense on the night. So I'm not really surprised that we saw that same thing. But Amorim's decisions on the night broke me. I've already mentioned the Dallo sub a few times. I don't know how long it came into the game, maybe 60, 70 minutes or whatever it was. I think he came on with Mainu, didn't he? The fact that he felt like he had to turn to Diogo Dallo, who we know doesn't contribute anything. He doesn't contribute anything. To bring him on at the time, right-footed, at left wing back while you've got Luke Shaw there, who I've spent a few weeks talking about being a potential higher quality outlet at left wing back. Look, if you're going to play a left wing back and you're going to play a right wing back, at least make those players attack minded if you're going to change something. Not Diogo Dalot. It's a definition of insanity, really. Like putting players like that on, expecting them to do something different. We've not seen good enough out of Dalot for a long time. And Amorim still chooses him. It broke me. Honestly, it really did. I criticize him for that. Like, why he's just falling back to bringing on the same players who just don't have real attacking brains or attacking intent. You get more of the same if you do that. Change something, do something different. And what I was saying over the past week or so, I would like to see Luke Shaw, who is fit and is, a player who is traditionally over the course of his career been a left wing back or a left back, right? Has better quality from that side. If you're going to throw crosses in, at least get the quality of the crosses right a little bit better. What I would have liked to have seen is maybe Lisandro Martinez wasn't fit enough, but I've talked about Martinez's intensity a lot. Could you have brought him into this game against 10? Could you have put Luke Shaw out to the left against 10? Knowing that Luke Shaw's big weakness is fitness and staying injury-free, United were pretty much camped on the edge of Everton's box for the entirety of the second half. So why don't you just put players who have more positive attitudes in those positions? If you have to bring on another centre-back, Aidan Heaven was there as well, Instead, we got Dalot. I would have liked to have seen Luke Shaw, who at least has more of an attacking brain on him, to me anyway, than Diogo Dalot does. Just put him at left wing back. If you have to use the wing backs and you have to use the centre backs, just change the personnel. And I think that's the big thing for me as well in terms of the personnel with the centre backs. So there are the general point stands of you don't need 3 centre backs for me against 1 striker. You don't. But if you are absolutely married to making that happen and your tactical identity and making sure that your players understand it in the long term, if that is the most important thing to you as a manager and you have to use them, again, change the personnel. It's about getting more attack-minded players on the pitch in certain positions. And what we saw over the course of the night was Luke Shaw, he was playing left centre-back, who was not advanced enough. You had Barry, who was the furthest player forward for Everton. Then you had Lenny Yoro on the right side and Luke Shaw on the left side, kind of both on the lines of the outside of the box, or the equivalent there, the channel area. Not really marking anyone and not doing enough in an attacking sense either. Yoro especially, look, he's good on the ball, but not in circumstances and situations like that. I was looking at Yoro and I was thinking, I think they are letting Yoro have the ball here because at the end of the day, this is a centre-back who United are expecting to create chances from, really. That's how the game ended up panning out. Yoro or Shaw would have the ball. Yoro especially would have the ball. And you just wasn't getting enough quality out there. So why can't you change the personnel? Look, United didn't do well on transitions throughout the entire night, but they should really have had more attacking options on the pitch in those positions where, look, let's say, for argument's sake, Bruno Fernandes went into that position. He's played in defense before, for one or 2 times. If you know you've got that much of the ball and you know that your right centre-back is getting the ball all the time and he's not really doing all that much with it, why don't you put an attack-minded player with actual quality in that position so he can pick up the ball and potentially change the situation? That was my frustration with Amorim there. And look, again, subs not used. Lacey, Ugarte, Martinez, Malacia, and Heaven, and the goalkeeper. No real attacking options there. Lacey, I would argue that you probably could have thrown him on, but I get why he didn't. Ugarte, not the right guy for the game. Martinez, if he's on the bench, surely he can play a little bit of a part. I think he has more quality on the ball for me than Diogo Dalot. You know, I know he's coming back from injury, but are you getting a better overall attacking thrust from your team if you bring in a defender who's good on the ball, who can pick out a pass? Dalot, I don't know what he does. I've got to be honest. It was a game really where United didn't have to spend all their time running backwards most of the time. So I think it would have been a nice one to kind of push Martinez back in. If he's on the bench, surely he can play a few minutes, you know? I realized that at the same time, it would have been, oh, why is he bringing another centre back on? That would have been a fair and just criticism. But look at the options on the bench that he didn't use. There's just, United just didn't do enough. Amorim didn't do enough. And it felt like United let the game pass them by. And that is the big frustrating thing for everyone, or one of the big frustrating things for everyone, because at the end of the day, you're playing against 10 men for 70 minutes and you're barely threatened. Everton put all their 9 players plus the goalkeeper in the box. I'm just happy to defend it, and bought free kicks, used the right decisions. I think there was one time with Dewsbury Hall, I was watching him and he was the furthest player forward for Everton. He got the ball. There were like 7 United players in front of him, and he ended up winning a free kick off Casemiro or Lenny Yoro. I think it might have been somebody like that. Then like Everton absolutely did a number on United throughout the entire night. Amorim did not do enough in the sense of getting his options were limited, but getting attacking players on the pitch, attack-minded players on the pitch to try and change the narrative, to try and force something different. Didn't have the players, full players at his disposal, but that's going to happen throughout the season. You're going to get injuries, and that's just the way that it is. Could he have used Lacey? For me, I think you have to be brave. You have to take risks. And it would have been a great story if he came on the pitch and did something which contributed to United actually getting a goal. It's all ifs and buts, but I just didn't see enough. I think everybody's culpable on this night. I think the manager is, and so are the players. It just wasn't good enough. Everton, whether they had 11 or 10, deserved to win. They applied themselves better. Their tactics were spot on. They knew how to defend. United were essentially clueless in how to create chances, and the manager didn't change enough, whether that's through putting personnel in different places or changing the personnel if he had to stick to the system that he was using. Didn't do enough to change the direction of the game, and United now are in 10th. They have 18 points. Everton are now above them and Liverpool in the league table. And we're embracing on a run of games which now look a hell of a lot more difficult for United, because this is the problem they have. They're going to play more teams that will do this to them. Isn't good enough for me, and there's not a lot of hope to come out of that one. But let me know what you think of it. Am I too square on, is this firmly the manager's fault? Let me know. Like, he is not. Well, he has to take blame. He has to take blame for that. He didn't do enough for me. But I just think this is a problem this football club has had for 12 years, winning games like this. It's twofold for me. It's this football club is complicated. I don't think it's just a case of changing the manager and just making everything super better. I stick to my thesis, give him the season, and we'll see if United have another season like last season, which is, again, entirely possible. And if anything, more likely than a steamroll up the table based on that performance again. Give him the season. It is painful to know that there's a possibility that United again will waste another season in terms of what they do on the pitch. It's painful to face that as a prospect. But I think this is a big ship that's got to turn around. And ultimately, there are bigger problems than just playing a back three, for me. Anyway, doesn't mean I can't criticize the manager either. He deserves criticism, but so do the players. Anyway, this is the Promised Land podcast. The Promised Land's a long way away, as ever. And I've been Scott Saunders. Please subscribe to the podcast. All the links in the description. Subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. And it's going to be a long week. It's going to be a long few months, probably, if United don't improve their levels of performance against teams like that you would expect them to beat going into the game on paper. But let me know your comments. Get in touch with me on social at @_Scott Saunders as well. And I'll see you soon for another episode of the podcast. Until next time, try and forget about this and just have a better week than the football suggests. See you soon.